Hello? Any better? Yeah. Getting there? Can you all hear me over there? Back? Good? Scott Morey? If you're happy, I'm happy. That's the way I look. Welcome, everybody. What a great program we just had from all the speakers. It was really exciting, and we got a lot of great comments, which was really nice and gratifying for us. We've been at this for a while. We'll talk about it and show you some slides to that effect. My name is Ralph Horgan. I'm the Associate Vice President for Campus Design and Facility Development. It's our group that has the responsibility at the university to hire the architect, hire the contractor, and then project manage as we go through. And if you saw the video, these buildings are really easy to build. They take like no time, 4 minutes, you're done. It's a piece of cake. So we have here a very distinguished group of folks who have been our partners in this project for multiple years. And I want to start with Andrew Riley, the Director of Construction. Bob Reppy is our Director of Design and Planning. Buzz Udell of Moore, Rubel & Udell. And Jeff Kaplan from Appaloosa Management, who's David's Chief Operating Officer and has been our David Whisperer for 4 years on this project. And this fella here, the cyclist, who's been to the orthopedic doctor 3 times since we started this project, is Brian Rutledge. So we're going to have questions at the end, but I think if people, we got a pretty good group here. If anybody wants to jump in, just raise your hand and we'll see if we can't do it. But Brian Rutledge always digs up the craziest photographs, or maybe Bob dug this one up. But I think, is Andrew Carnegie in that one?
We don't know. We think that's actually Mrs. Hammerschlag or somebody like that.
Okay. So years ago. And then GSIA, the Graduate School of Industrial Administration, was a new idea way back when. And then the Tepper School, which eventually became the Tepper School, began to grow. Andrew actually, when he was with a private construction firm, helped to build the Posner Hall that was an addition. And you can see here, but we ran out of room to grow. We had the original building, and then in 1970 it was added onto. In 1980 we got the Cooper-Simon classrooms. Can you see the dates? And 1993 was Posner Hall, and then in 2000 we added the Florida Posner Hall. So you can see, and the Kraus Campo came in 2005. So there was just no place to grow, and I think David and others, well, we did the 2009 edition as well in the Peace Garden. So that, we said, here we go. Well, there's the blue wall. We had to put that in there. That's a blue wall under construction, which was also a big impetus for our Tepper Quad project, for those of you who know the story. We'll skip that. So I'd like Bob to go through these slides. Bob is, we stole Bob from city planning, and he is a brilliant thinker and does the work of 3 people. He's extraordinary. And I think connects well with our architects, is our fixer downtown with things, city planning and zoning. And I'll click the slides, Bob, if you want to walk through them.
So thanks, Ralph. So, ooh, that's loud. Is that as loud as it sounds like to me? I know, I told him I didn't need a mic. My wife reminds me of that all the time. So back in 2010, when we were looking at this, we started thinking about, we knew we didn't have enough room, as Ralph showed the slides of old GSA Posner, how we had run out of room. We like to say that that building is the poster child for incremental institutional expansion, added on to 7 times over its 50-year lifespan. And so we said, okay, well, we can't do any more kind of Band-Aids at that site. Let's look at other sites. And so we kind of cast a wide net at the entirety of campus. We looked everywhere from the south of Forbes site, the site we're sitting on, of course, the Moorwood lot. We looked even at the tennis courts at Skibo Gym. And if you look at the next slide, you can see, we actually compared them all. And when we came down to it, at the end of them, only one of them was just right. The south of Forbes was just a little too far away from campus. The tennis courts was maybe just too small to get all the program we needed on. If you haven't been in the building, it's big here. The Skibo gym had a historic building on it. So the Goldilocks site really was this one that we're standing at, which was really exciting because we had for many years talked about the expansion of campus across Forbes Avenue and the growth of the campus, and this is the kind of future of campus. So we took this site. However, if you looked at our master plan that we were dealing with in 2010, our master plan had different ideas. Our master plan talked about at that site, what actually the site we're sitting on was going to be an academic building, but also a soccer field, which is kind of sitting there in the middle of it. And so we really needed to kind of start rethinking what that meant as we wanted to grow. We wanted to grow campus. What did that mean as we move forward? So if we advance up, so that they're showing the soccer field and the site that became now the Tepper Quad. Next slide, zoomed in on. So we started to look at campus, and this is a shot from, this is the 2012 master plan. And we started looking at where the growth patterns were. And if you've been hanging around campus for the last 5 years, we've had lots of groundbreakings, which is very, very exciting. Everything from Scott Hall to the work at Hamburg Hall to the Cohen Center expansion that opened a couple years ago. If you stick around, not too long from now, we'll have a big opening for Ansys Hall in about a year from now. So that's all very exciting. And all of that growth kind of showed as you started to move towards the north and across Forbes Avenue. And that is where the Tepper Quad really was born. So as you start to see, as we zoom into this area, we look at it. If you notice, there's that kind of triangular building. Forbes is running through the site. We're at the building on the left-hand side of the image here. And there's that triangular building. Immediately, we started readjusting the master plan. And you'll see in the next image as we advance, we eliminated that building, created the Tepper Quad, identified where this new big building, this new home for the Tepper School of Business and the other functions were, and we adjusted the master plan accordingly. And next thing you know, voila, we have the Tepper Quad, which we're very excited. Now this is the first building in it. Of course, the Tepper Quad was not exactly attached easily to campus. Many people asked where we were going to put a bridge to get over to the Tepper Quad, which we decided not to do. In fact, we started doing a number of other things. We started increasing and improving the pedestrian connections. We added traffic lights. You saw our temporary versions that are out there right now that'll become the permanent. Those will become new permanent traffic lights to get people across Forbes Avenue onto campus. We started extending utilities like steam lines and chilled water lines through a tunnel that Andrew's going to talk about. We brought in electricity onto the site. We brought in data. This, of course, is Carnegie Mellon. We love our data. So all of these things, and of course we had to deal with getting things off of the site. So where were we going to put our sewer lines? That all these things started to knit the site ready to go. So what that got us then, in about 2013, 14, when we brought Buzz and Brian onto the scene, is now we have a site ready to go. So the idea is, if you look at the next slide, we have next one.
Here we go.
This one, we started with this as our idea, and this was for you, Brian, of our building seed. And so the question is, how do we get from that, with this idea, to the next slide, which is where we're sitting right now. So I guess I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk about that next.
Brian, Rutledge has been unbelievable. We've probably had you in 250 meetings.
Oh, yes.
And very productive. Brian, very level-headed, steered us out of danger many times. And his wit is unparalleled. He gave a talk, usually when there's something called the Society for College and University Planning, or SCUP. And they had the regional conference here recently. And usually it's people like me who speak. And I said, well, if they want to have fun and they came to campus, let's put Brian on the stage. And the first thing, what was the first thing you put up on the screen? The cartoon.
Far Side cartoons?
Far Side cartoons.
Go to strength.
Personality type by Far Side cartoon. So to this day, we're still hearing from our professionals and peers around the country about that guy that gave that talk at SCUP. He was unbelievable.
I have SCUP listed on my CV now. I'm quite proud of that. So thank you. And for those of you who asked, this did not happen while on the bike. Bike riding is very safe. It is falling off your bike that is to be avoided.
Getting off quickly, right?
Yes, there are no easy way off the bike, and timing is everything. So in in 2014, our youngest was in first grade at Winchester Thurston, and they do a little unit on architecture. And so, hey, I know an architect. So Bob Reppy and I toured the first grade around to show them the site of the business school of the future. If you look at that picture, you can see they are very skeptical. This is a tough crowd we're dealing with here. And so what happened shortly after that, when I said we're building the business school of the future here and expected this to be, okay, let's move on. Well, what's that? Right? Why do you need that? Those seem to be some good questions. So we quickly handed out Oreos and moved on. But indeed, that is a good question in the sense of what is it you're trying to do with building a new building, in the sense of, building a new building just to get a nicer building is nice, but it's not really going to move things, not going to be very transformative. And so there was a lot of thought and background. Some of it was, just-in-time processing, and so the ideas were just catching up as we were digging tunnels under Forbes Avenue. And so the why part sort of comes from, this by the way is my favorite picture of old GSAA when it was just its steel structure in the sense of all the potential that happened there, but that's now the past. So what comes from the sort of idea that's sort of behind most of the building and the design that you see now is this idea that things are inherently interconnected now in ways that are much more important. And so my quick summary of this is business problems are not just business. So if you think about, take any, old school business grad, MBA student goes off and gets a job at, Ford, right? It's relatively straightforward, know some finance, know some accounting. Not really anymore, right? So if you want to go work at Ford, you need to understand robotic cars, which means understanding big data, artificial intelligence. But also, if you think about, it's not just understanding the mechanics behind AI and the engineering, it's also the fact that, wow, robotic cars are going to transform society in ways that we haven't really thought about. These are fundamental transformative changes. And all you were thinking you want to do is go get a job at Ford. And so the idea is that if you're going to be a business student now, you're not just taking classes in finance and accounting. You need to be connected to these deeper, richer areas around Carnegie Mellon. And Carnegie Mellon is a fantastic place for this, and so this is a natural thing to add. The other side of this, which I think is part of the genius of the whole plan that comes together, is all problems are business, in the sense that this is this kind of two-way street about this. So if you take any big societal challenge now, there's a big chunk of this that needs to understand the business side. So I don't know, take climate change with a hurricane bearing down the East Coast, and you think about all of the science behind climate change that you can discuss and understand. You got oceanography, got to be some biology in there. There's a whole bunch of different components. But if you want to understand how it's going to impact things, or you want to affect change, you got to run this at some point through the boardroom. And so this is the sense in which you need to understand how business works. And so this is part of this kind of interconnected vision that is the business school that's here. So to do this, the big component of this, one of the big components of this, is the where component. So let me click through this quickly because you saw those earlier slides. So this is, Buzz put this slide earlier together and I've been stealing it ever since. So the Tepper School is right at the heart of that figure 8, which is the business school is right at the center of campus now. And so it's at the center of campus. You gotta bend me some non-Euclidean geometry if you want, right? Chris is pretty skeptical, fair enough. But what we are is we are really busy, right? In the sense that this is way different from the way you build business schools in the past. Business schools used to be off at the edge of campus because you didn't want your business students bumping into anybody who wasn't a business student because they're very gentle and you don't want to break them, and they're like orchids or way off on the edge. No, you are right in the heart of it now, and you see this here in the sense of that path that's out there is just. There's just thousands of students passing by, and they're all coming to our big hub to get a cup of coffee, like moss to the flame. This is the sense that we're sort of right at the heart of things, and so the two sort of components that sort of put this together. This is this notion that Bob uses of interconnectedness, which is what do we mean by that? So if you think about collaboration, collaboration is efficient in the sense of the classic economic division of labor, right? So I do theory, you do data, I do my theory bit, you do my data bit, we merge them up, off we go, right? You do finance, I do some cryptography, we put them together, there's your fintech. Interconnectedness is different. What we mean by that is I will teach you my theory, you will teach me your data techniques, and we'll have sort of this deeper understanding. And so that's the sense in which it's not sort of this Word documents that floats around different departments getting edited, but this sort of coming together and this sort of deep understanding in the sense that you can ask and understand new questions by understanding what's going on. Fintech is not just finance done through technology. It is the technology transforming the finance in deep ways and vice versa. So the two big elements that are here, and then I'll try and pass this off to Buzz, is one is this location, right? This the description I'd be giving the faculty members here to try and get them ready was, this is like moving from Fox Chapel to Lawrenceville, right? So, it is time to embrace some skinny jeans, right? A fixed gear bike, right? Craft beer, right? It's going to be noisy. It's going to be, smelly. It's like, right? It's this very urban experience. It's lively and vibrant. It is no longer this country club experience with violins in the background, and that's by design. And then the second component of this is the fact that, and this is weird, you do not see business schools do this anywhere else. This is a 300,000 square foot building, roughly, of which maybe 200,000 square foot is the business school. There's 100,000 square feet of non-business school things. And for the most part, it's hard to point to places and see which is which. Ideally, yeah, exactly. They sort of blend and mesh. But we have different things living around here, and it's weird. If you go down and visit the Patty Kenner space, where you're going to wear some virtual reality goggles to learn how to speak French while ordering a Parisian cafe while feeling like you're standing, right? Yet that's an odd thing to put in a business school, but then you go, how can every business school not have that? Right? So the last sort of component I will show you.
Oh no, the slide. Oh no, not the pond.
Many people have seen my picture of the pond many times before, and it's a metaphor that is much loved.
Where?
So, exactly.
One could say that, yes.
So how do you do this? So some of this interconnectedness is organic in the sense that people are bumping together, and some of this interconnectedness is more structured. So if you look at lots of the design of the building, it is, don't take this the wrong way, it's not very precise in the sense that we didn't take a classroom and engineer it the way you typically engineer business school classrooms by placing seats in strategically exactly round places so that you can, optimize sight lines, and the professor stands here, and 5 minutes of the class he wiggles his right hand, and everybody, learns dividend policy or something. It is much more flexible, and so this came from a book on elementary school education, which was trying to sort of challenge the idea that if people were not sitting in desks in rows, they could not learn how to count. And so I don't exactly know the story. My story, I can just sort of imagine the frustrated architect saying, I'm tired of listening to you. You want your design? Here's your design. It's a freaking pond. I'm done, right? you roll it up. And you think about it, can I do all of elementary school education around a pond? And it turns out you can. And so if you go around the pond, you can see them learning biology, and it turns out you can learn some math, and then it turns out it's a pretty good place for arts. And then, you think about social society sort of things. It turns out lots of societies live near water for reasons that are kind of deep, and wow, we get the entire educational experience around a pond. But some of this comes from the idea of basically not trying to build in the pedagogy into the building in the sense of, there's all kinds of smart people that work here, there's all kinds of smart people that will be working here that weren't here when we started. And so much of the building to sort of design to sort of foster this kind of innovation. So all of the furniture that moves is designed to be moving. Okay, so I want to show you one last picture.
People were really into that pond. They were digging it.
Yeah, they boo. So Ralph mentioned we had meetings. I would like to show you one particular meeting. So if you notice the person on your left there that is bending on their arm like this, this was what we looked like when we started this project. And you'll notice there's Buzz there. Shortly thereafter, there were many meetings. Here you go. Thank you.
I think Thank you, Brian. So, Buzz, I'll give this to you. Buzz has been unbelievable. We were very pleased when Buzz was selected with his team, Jeannie, and all the folks that are here, and Alan, a landscape partner, and multiple others from Bureau Happold, and the rest of the huge team that it takes to do this. Buzz has a coolness about him. Can I tell the story, the first story about David?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure I know which one, but go ahead.
So we had the first executive steering committee meeting, which was with David and Subra and Jim Rohr, and he was introduced to Buzz. And we were actually in, and our former chairman of the board was there as well, Ray Lane. And David was sitting across from Buzz, and we were talking, about things, and David was very quiet, and he was about this far away, I think. Brian, you were there. And David said, Buzz, what's the best campus building that you know of? Don't bullshit me. And Buzz was like, whoa, okay. And he said, no, I would never do that, David. And now to answer your question, and he was so cool in that that overhand right that came there, and he's been cool all along, and obviously a thinker. He and Brian have lots of emails that go back and forth about very deep topics that I don't understand, but it's a pleasure working with Buzz and your team.
Thank you, Ralph. It's been really an extraordinary experience for us, and thrilling in many ways. Just to follow up on Ralph's comment, I was scanning my mind as fast as I could at my age, and came back and said, well, I think it's the Thomas Jefferson's UVA academical village, and I think it was Ray Lane
Yeah.
just jumped in and saved my skin. He jumped in and said, yes, that's the best building and campus space in the country. So we weren't fired. So one thing about interconnectedness that I think is special about this project, and it relates to things that Bob and Ralph and others have been saying, is that it exists within a set of almost nesting scale, so literally to the scale of the region, to the scale of the campus, to the scale of the groups of various sizes, to all the way from 1,000 people in an event like what we just had down to 1 or 2 people looking for a quiet place and a retreat. And we also had a very interesting situation of, I think, Ralph, at one point you said there were 16 prime constituents or something like that. But what made it not only exciting, but really allowed us collectively to be successful is that we fairly quickly developed what we think of as a kind of high-performance team in which everybody felt empowered to say sometimes difficult things and to challenge each other without losing a sense of collegiality and respect for each other. And that helped us enormously because a project this complex always has sort of bumps and valleys, and we're working with a fast schedule, quite a tight budget relative to the aspirations. And then we had a fantastic team. The whole connection to the campus and the inside out, with Alan Ward, who's here, and Sasaki, the aspirations for sustainability with Borough Happold, a great associate. I don't know if Deepak and R3A are here. Others that you've heard about, such as Mike Trick, who's here. It was literally scores and scores of core people. And then we have about 8 of them here, so I won't go through, but Jeannie Chen and Amy Hellman. I think women are better at keeping teams together. I might get in trouble for saying that, but and then we had a design review board with people like Don Carter and Vivian Lofness and many others. So all these pieces were just it was iterative. We kept cycling back to all the constituents, inviting all the input, and still move fast. So one of the key challenges is how do you take the great idea, which has to do with interconnectedness, which is beyond collaboration, and manifest it in all these scales, from the campus scale to the scale of a room to the scale of groups or individuals. And one thing that we've felt, sorry, I was just gonna, yeah, has changed order a little bit, but one thing that we felt was very important was that any building that can support the sort of vision of a lively hub that really attracts people from all across campus, but also keeps people here for long periods of time, and also is the home to the people who live and work and research and study here. And to do that, we think that there needs to be a diversity of types of space, from grand to intimate, of characters of space, from sort of quiet to lively, from spaces of movement to spaces of repose, from spaces that are for quiet study to spaces that are for sort of very active kind of, breaking boundaries and barriers. So that's a component that became very important that we kept testing as we moved through. And it was a complement to another key commitment, something that we've really believed in really for decades, which is that, the best that we can do as a design team is to create places that celebrate and nurture community, that create places that people want to be in, that are excited about being in, that create places that support their research, their collaboration, and their innovation. And there's some very interesting research that backs that up. Tom Allen, who was a faculty at MIT when we did the Sloan School core building there a number of years ago, some of you may know, has done a lot of research on the correlation between, it's a combination of distance and visual connection between people in a community, which essentially says that the lower a building is, so that you're encouraged to use stairs, not elevators, the less of a silo it is, the more you can see people, and the more you will have a correlation to things he's quantified, such as numbers of interactions and collaborations. And he actually took it as far in organizations as quantifying and comparing these metrics to numbers of patents, which he then related to innovation. So we had always thought of that as about nurturing community, creating places that people want to be in. We started to understand, 15 or 20 years ago, that it's also quantitatively and demonstrably important to the work that a group like everybody at Carnegie Mellon does. It has physical implications. When we started, the master plan allowed the building to step up when it got a certain distance back from Forbes. But we decided, for a number of reasons, if we could keep the building to a level, as I think you've experienced, where you can see people, 1 or 2 stories up or down from you. Ralph, at a meeting we were here a few months ago, we all came, we didn't have an exact schedule, and we all said we'll meet in the building and we'll find each other. And I just thought, how are we going to find each other? And then I bumped into Ralph, was it the 3rd or 4th floor? Third, at this spot, and Ralph said, this is where, it's one of my favorite spots, but it's also where I come when I want to bump into people. So there are these kind of eddies and places where the streams intersect, and where these interactions that are serendipitous happen, which are supported by the architecture. The other thing about making the building lower is that we were able to really ramp up the ratio of facade, or really skin, building envelope to building volume. So we actually had a 300,000 square foot building that, post some of the early programming, the wish list had gone to about 360,000, but the budget was much closer to 300,000. So we collectively decided a number of things, that every square foot had to count, that every gesture had to work in multiple ways, that the building could be, I think Ralph used the word that, we pride ourselves on being gritty, not fancy here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the configuration of the building essentially became 5 floors, one of which level 1 is not as big as the other 4, but 4 large floors. So there was a challenge of how do you modulate the scale. We saved money by keeping it to this big floor plate, and often big floor plates become oppressive. But key to that was the introduction of light, both from the exterior and from the atria, or there's really one atrium hub with 2 main sort of zones within it. And we worked with Borough Happold and with the DRB in really studying in great detail the light levels, but also the views out and the connectivity. So there's light, there's comfort, there's views out, there's connectivity between different areas of work that people are doing. And the DRB, I think particularly Vivian and a couple of others, were really standard bearers for holding the university to very high standards of every space must be daylit. One of our heroes, for those of us who are probably over a certain age, is Lou Kahn, who actually went so far as to say a space without daylight is not a space. You could argue that philosophically, but we basically believe that. But we almost got stuck on, so we got daylight everywhere. I think as you move through, you'll see some of it's what we call borrowed. You see through a space to the landscape. Our team worked very hard to develop sort of heights where the light could wash deeply in, because the floors get to a certain height, you can wash deeply in. We tried to minimize glare. We tried to pick up on connections and relations to adjacent buildings from the viewpoint of view. But the one place where we got into this kind of philosophical discussion was the people running the behavioral labs wanted them completely darkened. So, and we did have some spaces that, like for storage and for, changing your clothes, et cetera, that were hard to get light into. And we thought, oh, perfect, one of those spaces can become. And then we had a long philosophical discussion it wasn't that long, but in the design review board meeting of, was it okay to have darkened spaces for the behavioral lab? So as you walk through the building, I think you'll see how light plays, shade and shadow. Light plays on the outside of the building, and that connection to the ability to maintain your circadian rhythms and your sense of what the buzzword these days is biophilia, connection to landscape, are all very important to how you feel in a building. I was thrilled to meet one of Brian's colleagues who's in finance, and who came up and said, I'm excited every day when I come into the building. So that experiential and perceptual part of addressing the program, to us that's part of the program. It's not just meeting the exact functional needs of the layouts of spaces. One of the aspects of early integration of the team, and this also involves PJ Dick, who was at the table at the beginning, is we want to be economical. We want to have very high aspirations environmentally. That means not only every square foot of area counts. We like to say every square foot counts, every dollar counts. But we needed to create an integrated system of structural, mechanical, finished surfaces, sun shading, interior partitions that worked as an ensemble, and that also let us expose much of it. So there was an early decision that we were going to build a concrete building by using bubble deck, which you see as the voids, those open spaces in the floors. It's a system that's been around Europe and a little bit in Canada. This is the biggest installation of bubble deck in North America. But what it does is you can expose the floor, which again has some trade-offs. Some people would rather see, polished, fancier finish. You can expose the ceiling, as we did in many places. You can expose the columns. You have to be very careful about how you warm it up with things like a wood ceiling, how you dampen the acoustics with things like wood and acoustic clouds, how you add color to the space so you don't feel like you're in a cold space, but you still have the feeling of being in a loft-like space that is not precious, that has a little bit of grittiness, and that can be kind of, in a way, dressed up in the right places. But just for example, the bubble deck reduced our load, our weight, which tracks all the way down to the foundations. It also reduced our height from steel. We're in a steel town, so at first we all thought, well, we're in a steel town, this is where it all started, so are we going against the grain? And in the end, the bubble deck priced out either the same or just a little bit better than the steel. Saved us height, which allowed us to get the right height for all the spaces to be flexible so they could go from active learning to tiered to laboratory-like spaces. So how all those pieces come together with underfloor distribution of air and data in certain places, it's sort of a kit of parts. And the other part of that is at the core of the success and the resilience of this building will be flexibility, and as much flexibility as we can possibly bake into and design into the building. So this diagram shows a kind of plug and play. You heard somebody earlier today say, this building should be resilient and future-proof for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. One thing that flexibility led to was the ability to plan both traditional classrooms, you see on the upper left, largely tiered classrooms, a combination on the upper right, the same space tested as tiered and flat floor active learning, technology enhanced classrooms. And then where we had a lot of fun, and a lot of this was done in meetings and over the phone sometimes between meetings, sketching and holding up the sketches to the camera and going back and forth with Brian and Mike and others, and was pushing that to become kind of a laboratory for teaching and studying. So when you walk through, particularly the upper level of the graduate area, you'll see this really rich mix of informal meeting, but we wanted quiet study, not just only open. We wanted innovation spaces. We wanted coaching spaces. And so these spaces can have that much variation and more over the next 5, 10, 20, 40 years. The idea was to embed a robust infrastructure into a robust armature and then let there be lots of chance for variation. And you'll see as you walk through how the kind of what we call the choreography of community works, how light works, how a lot of the building is really pretty robust and straightforward, like a loft, like the places your students might go to work. But then it's warmed and animated by color and wood. You see here the kind of, a lot of it is really what are the bones of the building. And what's great about working with this concrete system is once it's built, you've got the building. You can change the acoustics, you can change the amount of detail and richness, you can rough it up. It's meant to be used and tested. And then it's meant to create many, many kinds of neighborhoods. This is one of the faculty neighborhoods, which has a kind of bar at the far end who's backed by sort of whiteboards. So every place, every inch that we could support connectivity, interconnectedness, collaboration, and a sense of feeling good in the building happens throughout the building. That's it under construction. Is this still me? The graduate domain, you'll see, which is flexible, can have the entire graduate cohort. These sliding doors to classrooms open up, so it's got many, many variations. It's kind of, that's it under construction. It's like a transformer. And the undergraduates, David was and Jeff were very determined that the undergraduates had a home base. But we overlap boundaries, so here the undergraduates' upper level is very close to entrepreneurship and can share an innovation hub with them. And that's it a little farther along. And
So we're going to go, thank you, Buzz.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have questions. Andrew Riley is our Director of Construction and Engineering. He's actually a senior director, and he hates me saying that because he says it makes him sound old, but he's not old.
I may be, but I just don't want to hear it.
Andrew's phenomenal. Andrew has he's very patient, but once the fuse gets lit, get out of the room, because there's no contractors that can BS Andrew, because he's been on the other side and he knows how these things work, and great with systems and contract language and everything else. Fantastic addition to our team. We stole him. After he built Posner and also PTC, Andrew.
Yeah, Second Avenue.
And our old colleague Joe Greenaway said, you got to get this guy. And we brought Andrew in specifically to build Gates Hillman, and now he's the director. So let's talk about construction, Andrew.
Sure. First, I'd like to thank our contractors. We had great contractors and subcontractors, BJ Dick, Lighthouse McCamish. I don't see many of them around here today, but we had a worker appreciation event a few months ago. But they did a great job, and we really appreciate all the work. We peaked around 275 workers on site over the approximately 3-year period. It all started in summer 2015. This is a utility crossing. It is not a tunnel, Brian and Bob. Utility crossing under Forbes Avenue. We didn't want to call it a tunnel because people were asking us to build a tunnel under, either a bridge over or a tunnel under, for the connectivity for people. The reason why we don't put people in this is 28 feet down. I mean, those are, the yellow shirts, those are people down there, right, under Forbes Avenue. So one picture is the first half going across from Hillman, and the picture on the right is the second half coming on the Tepper side now. I had to build half at a time during the summer. So in a 10-week period, we put that 28 feet under the roadway. That was summer 2015. We had the groundbreaking in October 2016. Had moved about 216,000 cubic yards of earth and dirt to make way for this. I got to check my notes for my figures here. To make the pad for the building. You can see we're right up against Central's football field. And the rock was a big discussion, big value management thing we had to do, right? We kind of built the building into the rock to try and save some money. Once again, trying to get as much space as we could, as cheaply as we could. So we kind of stepped the building into the rock layer, so we weren't digging out the rock, which is 10 times more expensive than just digging regular dirt. We had a lot of sustainability issues, process. The building's LEED Gold, will be certified LEED Gold. In the construction process, we have this sounds terrible, but there's a good side to it here. Over 2,100 tons of waste generated in our building process. Of that 2,100 tons, 2,000 tons have been recycled. Oh. So 95% of the waste going off the site from leftover crates, pallets, drywall, everything, 95% of it was recycled. So it's a great stat for us. The other one is the cistern. Down in the very lower right-hand, far back right corner of this picture is a cistern that holds 120,000 gallons of water, which which is a huge stormwater runoff issue in Pittsburgh, as you all know, about floods and things, has really helped us. That water used to go down Forbes Avenue and down to the bridge and blow the manhole lid off down at CIC driveway. When we had these rains and everything, that hasn't happened anymore. Water still comes out, just doesn't blow the manhole lid off, because we're capturing most of that now. And the rain on Sunday, we estimated on our 60,000 square foot roof, the rain on Sunday was 3 3/4 inches of rain, and that was 150,000 gallons of water, so our cistern's already full. As Buzz mentioned, the bubble deck. These are there was around 220,000 bubbles placed in the building. They were hard plastic balls, size of like kickballs. The reason of all the colors, people kept asking us, did the colors mean something? Is there something to them? And it was nothing at all. It literally was, the manufacturer of them was in New Kensington, and they also make kayaks. So they were taking their spare, either recycling misfits or extra runs at the end of the day and making balls out of it when they were making their kayaks. So they're the same thing that was in kayaks. And the principles of that, right, is you create, and what gives us the great volume. What I love is the great volume that we get, because since without any beams through the space, we can take the ductwork and put it right up to the ceiling, right? You don't have to drop down underneath a 24-inch beam somewhere. So we gain that whole volume, so that gives us all these great high ceilings. Because the slab itself becomes the beam, right? You get a top chord and a bottom chord, the way an I-beam, a steel I-beam works. I could talk about that for a long time, so I'll move on.
Please don't, Andrew.
Construction.
That's a great start. I like that.
Got the dean right here.
The other big thing we had was the Tricourt Trust that's out here in the front of the atrium. It's what, believe it or not, that glass wall at the front of the building, everything from above the vestibule, above the roof of the vestibule, is hung down off of this Tricourt Truss. That's why you don't see the fins of that glass wall come all the way down to the floor. They stop because it's literally hung down and holds it. So this was a huge momentous occasion when we put that Tricourt Truss in place. The key to construction of such a large project, and I say this because my nemesis is in this picture, because it still exists out there. That telephone pole that's leaning is a Verizon wireless Wi-Fi access pole that they have authorization from the city to put that in, and we have just been battling back and forth to try and get it taken out. Our new light poles that we're putting in will have capacity, thanks to Utkarsh and Mike. We'll have capacity to take that wireless antenna that sits on top of that pole and put it inside the light pole, the new light poles that we have. Just we're waiting for those particular light poles to show up that they go into. But communication is the key, even if you're fighting that communication company through the whole process. Overall, see where I'm at. I'd also like to thank Central Catholic. They were a great neighbor for us and a great ally in our process. We drastically changed our landscape. If anyone remembers, there was a wooded hillside, and they were pretty remote down there in the bottom. It's completely changed. And I'd like to also thank our team, Mike Kelly, Brennan Garrison, Utkarsh Goodell, Rayhan's helped us as well. And our business operations groups, Ellen back there, we got to thank her too. Greg McDowell is here. He's was part of the civil package doing the utilities come to site. So I want to thank all of them. Also, what was important was to get to this finished product was we tried things out. We did a big mock-up out there, and we tried things out, and as we said, it was a great team effort to help figure out and solve things.
Thank you, Andrew. Good. I mentioned Jeff before. We've had lots of meetings here with the Executive Steering Committee, and usually about 2 hours later, Brian and I were on the phone with Jeff saying, here we go. And then Jeff would work it out, and we'd come back together and fix something. We did that dozens of times, and Jeff has been phenomenal to work with. Obviously astute at business, but astonishingly good at design and things aesthetic as well, which has been a huge help to us in terms of interpreting things with David. But Jeff asked for one slide. There's Lori Weingart signed a bubble. But Jeff asked for one slide. On time, on budget.
Was my job. So you all know, as the Dave Tepper whisperer, I would get don't bullshit me all day, every day. Once in a while is not so bad. Just to finish with this esteemed, wonderful group. On time, on budget is obviously more of a business philosophy that Dave and myself were trying to bring to this project. We obviously had the architectural dimensions, the execution dimensions, a lot of talent that was brought to this team. And Dave was looking to me to make sure, not that the project was so much on time, on budget. I mean, that is our slogan, but it was really on strategy and on point. It was so much more important than, although we did end every meeting with, Ralph, Brian, are we on time and on budget? Yes, Jeff. And every email was the same. And it was within honesty, because we were all very conscious of our goals. But the on strategy, on point was, there was a strategic vision that Buzz and others have articulated better than myself. Even Dave as presenting this as an idea, not just a building. And our job was to fill the building with a heart and a soul and to give it sort of his signature, but really the school's signature. That's part of the job that I hope to take on Dave's behalf. And on budget, really on point, was really impeccable execution, because you can imagine the enormous amount of time spent on detail. And we're all detail-oriented in different ways, and I'm a finance guy with some visual acuity and acumen. And I would come out and we'd talk about handmade brick, and here's a slab of handmade brick, and a granite cornerstone, and the finish on the columns, and the mix of glass to steel. And fortunately, I was the one who could react almost as the layman, not just on Dave's behalf, but as a lay person amongst experts, to make sure that this sort of generational building was being interpreted in a way that we and the donor saw as the right direction, and that it was being perfectly executed by a team who was as good as any in this country and maybe the world. So I was proud to be a part of it. We had a few little storylines and vignettes along the way that I would say were interesting for me. A couple of snippets. I remember. We always had to schedule a meeting every so often. And finding Dave, it's like witness protection. Where's he going to be? South Beach, Short Hills. We're going to be in New York. We're going to be in Pittsburgh. So, is he in a good mood? How's Appaloosa doing? So these were finely choreographed meetings. And one of the first ones we had with Buzz and always Ralph and Brian and team were renderings of the building, like things that Dave and I could see and appreciate. Right, and they came into the office and presented some initial ideas. And Dave looked at me, and I looked at Dave, and we looked at Buzz and Brian. And Dave said to me, "What do you think?" I said, I kind of gave a nod. He said, I think his words were, "I want to be more inspired by the building." Really, he just said, "I want to be more inspired by it." And I think Buzz, to his credit, took that as great. This is a guy who, it's not just the money. It's not just the function, it's not just the building. It's like, let's make this transcendent. And, let's have not just a functional vision and a generational vision, but an aesthetic vision. And Buzz and team, really Ralph and Brian, we all did, we changed it, and we made it inspirational in our minds and our eyes. And this is a big building. When you first looked at it, it was like, shit, that looks like a big schoolhouse. It's like, let's turn it into something. And it never was going to be that. These were just initial renderings. But for us to see it, and Buzz and team took the challenge. And then we had like very mundane meetings. And Bob or Andy referenced this, whether it was digging into granite. I remember we had a call. It was like, well, we need a second level of parking, but we have all this bedrock. What are we going to do? It's going to cost more. Should we raise more money? Will it compromise the schedule? And as Dave says, I'm usually the hammer, but the hammer with the velvet glove, which is like, all right, let's figure it out. It's not just because it won't be on budget that we can't do it, but let's figure out what the right answer is, what's most important. We didn't do the second level.
No, we
It
didn't.
was too expensive.
We didn't. Too expensive.
And it wasn't core to the mission. Everyone just sorted through the priorities of, we want a lot of things, but what do we need? And then, as importantly, we had a wonderful finish from graduation to today. This building was largely done when we were here in May. But, like a house becoming a home, it needed finishes. And, part of my job with Ralph, with Buzz, with everyone was, signage was finishing, landscaping was finishing. I mean, all of the landscape architecture I mean, as much time as we all spent on that to finish this, as important as it is, when I came up here this morning, and I just kind of looked up and I said, boy, it's perfect, right? So the finish was part of this impeccable execution. So anyway, I was privileged to be a part of the team. And, you know, the words were, collaboration was the word we used. It's like all over the building for the students, but collaboration amongst this team, phenomenal. Communication, great. And confidence in one another. We each had our role. For them it was a full-time job, for me it was a part-time job, but we all depended on each other, and there was a lot of confidence in that, and it was a real tribute to the team. So I thank all of my colleagues for that.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Any questions? We'd love to hear whatever curiosities anybody might have. I'm going to ask Brian Rutledge a question in that case. Nobody has a question?
Ralph,
I
we had a
have
question
some.
over here.
Well then, please.
Yeah.
So is there going to be another building required, and if so, where does the next one go?
Oh,
So-
sure. Let us open this one.
Probably have let me, I don't know how quickly I can
Very
go
beginning.
back. Yeah,
Way at the beginning.
not that one. Here we go. Oh, wait, but Bob's
gotta way back.
master plan
Yeah.
slide, sorry. We're reliving our presentation. So as you can see, the Tepper Quad is the building, obviously, on the left, and then the actual landscape quad, and then those other buildings are actually building footprint sites in our institutional master plan. But the landscape, as you can see, runs north towards Fifth Avenue, will always be maintained. So where you see a parking lot outside, that's a future building site. When you see parking behind the building towards WQED, that's a future building site. So, good question.
It's worth noting too, I would like to point is that crossing that you see where the red and kind of light blue arrow are, the one right out here that goes to Hillman, we started planning that crossing in 2006. Both
Wow.
the utilities
Yeah.
and the people crossing that space. We had no idea it was the business school
Yeah.
moving here. But Bob and Ralph started planning that back in 2006.
There's a question over
Yes,
here.
please.
What's in the old GSIA Posner Hall, my school, my old school in '96?
In GSIA, it will be the master's program in the School of Art, and also the School of Music will be in there. And in Posner, it's a series of things, mostly Dietrich related, but also then student success, a big home for student success, and a series of 10 classrooms that were Tepper-only classrooms, which are now back to the registrar. So it's a super win for the university as a whole.
I was commenting to the head of fine arts that they're taking over what used to be, finance faculty offices and turning them into like an artist studio. And that it was a shame that this gentrification was making it so that, investment bankers couldn't afford an office anymore. It's sort of a weird direction, but it makes me kind of happy.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Now that you see students and faculty using the space, are they using it the way they anticipated, or are there any surprises with how they?
Let's let Buzz take a crack at that first, maybe.
I think, well, since Brian's been teaching, he should, but I'll just say a couple things and then throw it back to Brian. I mean, as architects, what we really live for is how spaces are experienced and used. So it's been a few months since I've been here. Amy's been coming every few weeks, but seeing it actually opened up and hearing from people who say, I come here even though I'm not part of the school to hang out, and I find my favorite place, and some other people saying, I like the diversity, somebody might want to be way up high, and somebody may want to be tucked away. So, so that kind of diversity of the commons, in a way, rather than we've done other buildings that have great atria, but not the richness of choice. It's like the pond, that you can find your place in the ecosystem. And I think Brian should really talk about the teaching and the faculty. And
We haven't been here that long, in a sense, to see, but I mean, I think the hope is that people will use it in space in ways we hadn't seen before. And there's certainly lots of students sort of perching in these little places, and I think that was intended, but I don't think I understood what that meant. And it's you walk past, it's fun to see people living in the building. It is busy in the sense that it is successful in the sense I have not been to the building when it's quiet, in the sense that when you don't have this kind of buzz and hub feel to it. So
the food service, we tend to do this thing of whenever we visit buildings, we ask everybody what works and what doesn't. But we talked to somebody in food service, and they said the number of meals and the demand was higher than they expected. Although they're going to roll out an iPhone or app so you can order and pick up, so they're kind of like settling in, trying to understand the flows.
So this morning I was told by Dean Damon that there was a graduate student who had office hours out here.
Oh,
and he
cool.
had the little paper sign up, and it was for Psychology 101.
That's right out here.
Right out here.
Oh, I love it.
So I
love to
may
get a
answer your
picture of that.
question.
Yep.
That's funny.
my answer to all of this is it's a feature, not a bug. Yeah.
I thought I saw another hand up
There was
over
another hand over there, maybe.
No? Okay.
Here.
Oh, here.
Yes, please.
Couple of.
What are you doing with water in the system?
Oh, it is going to flush, we use it to flush the toilets and urinals and things. Yep. So we pump it back through the building of a group, what's called a gray water system.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of other.
Would somebody else have a hand raised back there? Okay. All right, well, I think we're actually right on time, but we can stay as long as anybody wants, and if you want to come up. But I have to give Brian Rutledge the last word. It's been a tremendous honor working with you on this, and we're going to have you on lots of committees.
Awesome.
To reward.
Only thing I'd point out was that the big strategic decision we made early on, the one that was absolutely the most important, and live by this. If you learn nothing from this panel, this is it. We did not have any committees. There were no committees on this. You will note that Ralph and I were the chair of the working group. It was not a committee. We are working. You can come to our meetings all you want. You're welcome to come, but we are a working group. We're not a committee. We did this whole project. There wasn't one vote. So
Yeah.
we didn't do any poll voting. We didn't do any. It was we just going to sit here until we figure it out and we all agree, or we yell at one another, or all of those things happen. So, but thank you, Ralph. It has been an honor and a privilege. So, working with everybody, we are very lucky to have had Buzz and team on. Ralph's group is spectacular to work with, as well as all the folks who worked at our local folks, the R3A and PJ Dick. It is amazing to watch it all come together because it's every bolt and screw at some point somebody decided on and put in place, and it is amazing that that all happens and that here we are. So anyway, thank you all.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Two major injuries.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.